So the focus today is on in-sessional teaching and teacher development. And I'd just like to start by giving you some background to this particular event. So last year, I gave a paper at the conference, the Barleap conference in Glasgow. And this was the title. And I'm just going to show you the opening slide there. It was called Taking the Plunge, Making the Transition from Pre-Sessional to In-Sessional Teaching. And here we have a lone penguin taking the plunge into the sea. And when I gave this paper, the speaker who was scheduled to be after me was no longer presenting at that time. And so we were able to run over a bit. And we ran over quite a bit. And the Q&A lasted longer than the presentation. And this seemed to suggest that there was a fair amount of interest in this topic. And then I followed up after the presentation with questions that were in the Zoom chat that we hadn't had time to deal with on the day. And that took me an entire day, corresponding with different people in many different places, some of whom are here today. And again, this suggested that there is a fair amount of interest in this topic. And one of the comments in the chat last April related to doing a TED in EAP event. So here we are today, picking up where we left off. So the aims are really to explore in-sessional teacher development with some personal reflection based on my experience of moving from pre-sessional to in-sessional teaching. Also taking a case study of how you might address some of these challenges with a teacher development programme and how you would use specific or could use specific EAP frameworks to inform that. And there's also going to be the opportunity for all of us to discuss teacher development for in-sessional EAP teachers in your institutions, in your experience, and think about different approaches and how effective this is and how it can be more effective, perhaps. So it's really an opportunity to shine a spotlight on in-sessional teaching and teachers. And the intention is not to be in any way divisive in terms of in-sessional and other teaching contexts, such as pre-sessional, but rather to focus on what's distinctive about in-sessional teaching and the particular development needs of teachers in this particular context. So just to give you an overview, the format of this session is going to be this workshop will be in 5 main parts. The presentation that I'll be giving is very much based on the Barleap conference paper I gave last year. So if you were at that, apologies if this is a bit repetitive. I won't be offended if you want to go and make a cup of tea. But then we'll have some breakout rooms to discuss some key questions and compare approaches in different institutions and some feedback looking at the key points from your discussion. Part 4 is going to be an overview of a sample in-sessional inset session. So you will have the opportunity to choose a particular focus, and then I will run us through what we did in the inset session on that aspect of in-sessional teacher development. And finally, some roundup and questions. Okay, so just so you know, I think parts 1 and 4 will be recorded and available for viewing afterwards. The slides will be available on the TED in EAP website. And also, if anyone would like a transcript of the presentation, you can email me. My email address will be on one of the later slides. You can email me and I can provide a copy of the transcript as well. Okay, so just some context to our in-sessional situation. This gives an overview of the kind of provision that we offered in the previous academic year. The number of different discipline-specific classes at undergraduate and postgraduate level, some postgraduate research courses, the know-how academic English, which is more general academic English, and one-to-one writing consultations. So that was the full year last year. And we worked as a team of about eight and a half full-time teaching and 1.6 director and admin staff. So we're about 10 of us delivering this provision. And since really about 2010, I would say in our department, we've moved more towards discipline-specific in-sessional provision. We still have some general EAP, but we've moved from what was predominantly general EAP to more discipline-specific EAP. And actually that's true of pre-sessional as well as in-sessional. There's definitely since 2010 been an increase in liaison with departments. We are becoming more embedded, but there's always more we can do in that respect. And I think more explicit engagement with EAP theories and practices. And this is something that, we're focusing on through our scholarship. And so during this period of changes in approach, we are developing better disciplinary knowledge and knowledge of different disciplinary discourses. So one of the things that we're emphasising really today here is the focus on the ISE teacher and their development as a practitioner in this role, doing all of these things. And as I was preparing for this, I realised that I had certain assumptions about what an ISE teacher is or can do. And these are my assumptions, which you may agree or disagree with, but I thought it was a useful starting point to actually reflect on my own experience as well. So these are my assumptions, and feel free to disagree with them, but there's an assumption that when you teach on ISE, you will already have taught on pre-sessional PSE, that you will have taught EAP for a number of years, that you can create materials for different degree levels, different academic disciplines, that you're familiar with different approaches to teaching, and that we can do this pretty much independently, but not necessarily in isolation. And I found myself asking how much of assumptions 3 to 7 can be achieved on the basis of 1 and 2. And I think this is the crux really about making that transition from pre-sessional to in-sessional. And there may be other assumptions. And that's something that we'll have the opportunity to discuss later in the breakout rooms, what your assumptions are about in-sessional teachers and how that informs teacher development. Okay. So moving on to the reality for ISE teachers at work. Okay, this image, which I'm going to describe here, is based on the title of an article by Hilary Nessie, Swimming with the Sharks. And I think the full title is Swimming with the Sharks, Helping Students in Infested Waters, which is a bit scary perhaps, but she was looking at discipline tutors' expectations of students. And there was an exchange with a history teacher, I think, where their attitude was that there is no definitive set of expectations about writing in history because the expectations vary. And their advice was that the students had to learn to swim in shark-infested waters. And Nessie's reflection on this was that ultimately, and I'm quoting Nessie here, ultimately, students have to look out for themselves. Sometimes pre-sessional course tutors are guilty of keeping their students in the shallows until they're absolutely sure that they can swim, when instead they need to be helping them develop the skills they need to survive alone in an unpredictable open sea. So although this article talks a lot about the students making the transition from pre-sessional to in-sessional, and perhaps the need to take steps into the unpredictable open sea, I think there are some parallels perhaps here with in-sessional teachers as well. Going back to those assumptions that I mentioned about how do you make the leap to the later assumptions on the basis of the earlier ones. And so in this image, we've got in the first one, in the top left-hand corner, we've got some people in a safe cage, just watching the sharks circling around them, observing sharks, okay? Or maybe they're friendly fish and not sharks. But if you think about an in-sessional teacher in a safe space, observing the discipline, but then over on the right, you can see that this person is no longer in the cage. I think their expression is slightly surprised, but they are there, surrounded by the sharks. They're not in a safe space, they're in there swimming with them. The third image in the bottom left, it's got a couple of people actually really probing the animal and investigating it right close up, touching it, another step closer. And that final image is of someone who's looking very, very comfortable in these waters, very at ease and okay in that environment. And initially I thought these might be like different stages in the transition, that you start from a safe space, investigating the disciplines, and it takes a while to step out of that and get more comfortable and start really interrogating the disciplines, and then you become confident at working in that discipline. But I think it would be a mistake to think that this is a purely linear journey, that you start at one point in your career and then you end up like the person who's very, very comfortable in these unpredictable open seas, because I think that's the nature of an unpredictable open sea. It wouldn't be sensible to be too comfortable because it's unpredictable. I would also say that on any given day, I might feel like each of those people. If I'm working in a discipline that I'm very comfortable with, then I might feel like the person out of the cage who's A-okay. But if you gave me something like law, I would be back in the cage and I would be a bit intimidated. So I think there are some parallels here between the transition that our students make from pre-sessional to their main programs, and also the transition that we make as teachers. And it suggests that the role of an ISE tutor differs from the role of a PSE tutor in terms of the context and the student's sudden plunge into the disciplines. So I think there